And we are live. JT here, and welcome to the Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching on YouTube or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focused on the here and the now. And I guarantee you, you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. Been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest. I've been planting some seeds, for the last probably year about bringing him back on. And, I thought life's all divine timing. So I thought it'd be perfect to bring him back into the Huddle for a second time on our Huddle Revisited series. My guest in the Huddle today is currently serving as the head coach with the Carleton Ravens football program. My guest in the Huddle today is Coach Corey Grant. How are you today, brother?
I am great. How are you doing? Appreciate you bringing me back on.
Yeah, it's all good, brother. I was just thinking how funny how much things have changed, how some things have stayed the same, but it's crazy. Just reminded me that our first conversation was like 3 years ago, and it's just really cool to look back and just see how life has unfolded in those 3 years.
Yeah, things have changed. I think last time we talked, it would have been and did this. I was at McMaster as the offensive coordinator. Now I'm sitting I moved a step over and now I'm the head coach. Was in Hamilton and now I'm in Ottawa here, loving it and doing that piece. So just like you said, things have changed, but they're also stay the same. I'm still doing football.
Yeah.
Right. My position's changed, but I'm still doing football and hopefully have an impact on some young men and this great sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And brother, before we get kicked off, I just want to take a moment to count my blessings. For me, it's a daily practice. Some days I do it better than others, but I do find those days where I'm most intentional, most consistent counting my blessings. I do find those days are filled with a little bit more love, a little bit more joy, a little bit more peace. And I'm a big believer, biggest blessing you can give anyone is your time and energy. So just want to thank you again for blessing us with some of your time and energy, especially as we head into that sort of busy time where things start to slowly start to shut down in our football space, especially at the youth sport level.
Yeah, no, not a problem. I enjoy having conversations with you. And anytime we get together or meet at an event, we sit back, we have some great talks and we always take time. So this is not a problem. I know for me, it is coming into that slowing things down and getting into July during the youth sport blackout and doing that. But anytime I got time for you.
Thanks, brother. So I'm curious, it was actually end of September of 2021 on a bye week is where you kind of first graced us with some of your time and energy, shared some wisdom. I'm curious as we start to look back over the last 3 years and how life has unfolded for you both personally and professionally. I'm curious, what is something you've taken away from the game of life that you find is still at top of mind today?
Great question. I think for me, one of the biggest things has taken away is that self-care, right? As I've moved positions and moved with my family and doing those things, everything has just been so fast and life seems to be just going so fast and a lot of changes and doing those things. And for me, it's always wanting to try and do everything and not worrying about myself, just going. I would say I'm my mother's child. I'm my dad's child and doing those things. That's what we just know growing up. But I think over the years, I've learned about more self-care, taking time for myself, taking time for my family, because what would I say? This is year 16 going into for my daughter. When you become a new parent, everybody says cherish the time because time's going to go by so quickly. Right. And now looking back at that, at that time, you never understood that. And now you do as your kids get older and as your family evolves in your career and doing those things. So for me, the biggest thing for me over this time has really been that self-care, that self-reflection, and making sure I'm here, I'm healthy, and I'm here not only just for everybody that I support in this locker room, but my family at home and making sure I'm there for my kids. So that would be my biggest thing over this last little bit.
Mm. It's interesting as you share that. And, I think like you, I mean, you're an educator at heart, right? Although you're
Yep.
not teaching in the four walls of a traditional classroom, you're an educator at heart.
Yep.
I'm curious, has it been easy for you to sort of become more sort of self-reflective in that self-care that, hey, in order to truly help and support and serve others, I actually need to be sort of dialed in on myself, on my self-care. Has that been an easy transition for you?
It hasn't been. It's something I'm learning every single day, right? To this morning, I get up and I'm like, all right, let me rush into the office. Let me get into the office. And I have a whole bunch of things to do. I want to finish everything before July and I want to get it all done. And then I took a step back and it was raining and it was easy enough for me to say, you know what, let's just go in and get it done. I'll go get my run in or just take care to meditate and I took a step back right there and then and said, you know what? I'm not going to be any good to myself and to the rest of the day if I just rush out of here. Right. So it is an evolving thing. There's an evolving process with it. There are some days where I'm just like, I got to get in and I got to get it done and do those things. But it is me every single day reflecting at night and in the mornings going, okay, what is best and what is going to get me and how am I going to tackle this day and get better? It is evolving. It's not something. Sometimes I revert back. So I may take 2 steps forward and then take one back. So hopefully the next day I can take 3 steps forward. And then as long as I'm moving forward and progressing forward, I know my kids are seeing it, my wife is seeing it, and they can learn those lessons. And then, as you said, my players are seeing it, right? And really, as I show them what leadership is, trying to show them what leadership looks like, hopefully I can instill that on my own coaching staff, right? There's only so many hours in the day, and we want to make sure that we use it to the best of our ability, not only just for the football piece, but what are we doing? Everybody helping everybody around us.
Mm. I love that you share that, right? Like you talked about this idea, like it's a daily practice, right? Some days you do it better than others, but it's constantly growing, it's evolving. I'm curious, what you talked about showing this to, obviously the three closest people to you in your life, your family, you're showing it to, the young men you're leading, the coaches you're leading. What are you noticing as you're sort of communicating that, hey, this, you don't get it right 100% of the time? What are you noticing them as leaders growing and evolving along with you?
Yeah, definitely. Right. And I said that I had a meeting with my coaches 2 weeks ago, right? Just to talk about the season. And we actually sat down and you talk about teaching, right? I was like, wait a second, I'm the teacher on the staff, right? I went to teachers college. So we went and talked about the different learning styles and what they look like and how are we doing that to sort of get all of the learning styles because we have a vast roster, right? And when we sat down and we looked at it, each individual learns differently, right? But are we teaching to those learning styles, right? Are our guys, when they're watching us, and I told the guys when I was talking to them, they're watching what we do, how we speak to them, how we interact with each other, how we interact with other people in the community. They're watching everything we do, right? And we may not get it perfectly, and it's okay. And I tell my guys this all the time, it's okay not to be okay. But as coaches, as we do that, if they're watching us and they're watching us as role models, how we interact and what we do, they're taking those lessons too. So I am seeing it in our players daily on how we speak, how they're coming, how they're being prepared, how they're showing up on time, right? They know if they're 5 minutes early, they're about 10 minutes late. So now they're early for everything. They're showing up on time. So we are learning it. We are holding them accountable. And in turn, guess what? They're holding us accountable. So it is a daily thing. But it is good when I do get to see it, not only in my coaching staff, but to get to see these young men evolve over time. And then even myself saying, letting them know I'm not perfect.
Mm.
Um, I'm going to make mistakes, and they'll correct me on that, and that's okay. I admit up to them, and then how we deal with that and move on. So it is great to see over these last 2 years, going on to the third year, seeing that within the locker room and that development piece, and it's evolving and learning, and they're growing too. So I'm happy. We're not satisfied, but I'm happy where we're at. And then as we continue to grow, it is really rewarding to see that, not only just in my own kids at home, but also these young men that we are hopefully leading right now in that right direction.
Mm. Curious, you talked about this idea, like they're constantly watching, right? And I mean, you got kids, right? They constantly, it's not, don't tell me what you're going to do, show me what you're going to do, right? I'm curious, are you seeing that idea, especially with young people today, that sort of this idea that more is caught than actually taught? Like you can say something's important, but they're actually going to see, like, are you actually living it? Are you embodying it? Are you demonstrating these habits yourself? Are you finding that with today's young people, that they really they want people to authentically lead them and show them through their actions, not just their words?
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of them, they want to see what you're doing, right? Because we can all, and I can give them the coach speak, right? Oh, I'm going to do this. We're going to win if we do this. And, your life will be better if this and that. But I think it is important that they do see it, that it is your true authentic self that they're getting. And when they can see it, then they can believe it, right? And I know probably 3 years ago, we talked about that, is if we can see individuals in those leadership positions that look like me, right?
Mhm.
Look like us, from different backgrounds and different cultures, they can see them in those leadership positions. We talked about that 3 years ago. So that's why when I say things are changing, but they're still saying the same, it's still seeing that conversation now, right? They want to see it. And then if they see it, they really truly believe it. So if I'm walking that walk and talking that talk, they're more apt to follow, right? But if I'm saying one thing out of one side of my mouth and then acting the other way, they're not going to believe it. And then they're really just going to be, you know what, I can't trust that person, or I don't want to follow that person, because they're not truly authentic to what they're believing, and they're just more talking it, right?
Yeah. I love how you share, right? Like, hey, it's acknowledging the fact that, yeah, you could have that coach speak where it's like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yep.
But it was interesting. I actually had this flashback of this memory where we were talking about, like, what are the straight facts? Like, what are we seeing in terms of people actually in positions of leadership? And I remember you were saying this number, I think it was like 3 to 5 at that time in 2021, that were actually in like coordinator positions. And now fast forward, and this is something we always talk about. Now you have 4,
Yep.
right? Coaches that identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color, right? In the
Yep.
OUA. So I'm curious, what has that been like? Because again, you were sort of, from that first conversation, you were kind of one of those catalysts of change that were sort of really helping to, hey, it's great, but we can do better. I'm kind of
Well,
curious, what's your thought as you reflect back on the last, 3+ years?
um, it's amazing that things have changed.
Yeah.
To that point where there are more in those leadership positions, whether it's coordinator, whether it's head coaches, and doing that. Are we where we want to be? No, but it's also, as I reflect back, it had to start somewhere, right? And it had to start with sort of these conversations. It had to start with putting groups together and having that dialogue. It's meeting with other coaches and that allyship, and what does that look like, and that better understanding, bringing our athletes in that are those leaders, that some of them have moved on but are still having these conversations in their other jobs that they're doing now, right? So we're sort of, and I talk about it here, right? We were able to sort of set a foundation, right? And it had to come under, circumstances that it did, but now we've set those foundations. How are we building on that, right? And continuing to build. Are we at the Dr. Martin Luther King, are we at the mountaintop yet? No, but we're working our way. We're doing those little things. And I think as I look back and reflect on it, I think at times we were just trying to piece it all together. I think for the student athletes and for the young men and the young women and the individuals, there's a better foundation for them that they can start to continue to build on, right? Because now, as my son says, I'm old, right? Daddy, you're old. You're out of shape. and doing those things. But I think my daughter, and we could hopefully we'll talk a little bit about that in the football program and doing that and what that looks like with women in sports. But there's a better foundation for them now to build on as we start to move forward and progress. So I look back at it. I'm glad we can say, we've had a little bit, a tiny bit of that change and the keeping the discussion going and moving forward, and love to be able to see that change. We have a long way to go, still building up as allyship and what that looks like, and moving forward and keeping this diverse game and keeping it diverse and having individuals speak on those things. And it's not just something that's left in 2021, and we keep moving forward with it in 2024 and beyond.
It's interesting, like you talk about that, like it's great, but we can do so much better, right? It's acknowledging that. And it's interesting, like you were saying now, you obviously get a different perspective, right? Through your daughter and her own, athletic journey, right? Within football and seeing it. As you think back to, laying the foundations a couple of years ago with Coach Ruler, Coach McIntyre, what is it like now to sort of be in this space now where you get to kind of look at it as a dad, but then you see all this changes of how women and girls opportunities as for student athletes is changing, coaching, administrators. Yeah. What has that been like to kind of, I don't know, just as you look back now, but then see it through a different set of eyes?
It's awesome. Like, I'm not gonna lie. It's awesome to see that. When you talk about Coach Ruler, who's down there, I think now in the States, with the Bengals for training camp, was with Seattle, is doing things in university. Coach Taylor knocking it out of the park, just exploding, right? And couldn't imagine back starting a program like that. And I know they made Coach Taylor's always, opening the, I didn't do it. They knocked down the doors. All I did was get some help, sort of cracked it open a little bit with an idea, and then they've kicked it down, and the program and women in sports has grown in this province and across this great country of ours, right? And just to be a little part of that and helping facilitate that and helping, open the door, crack the door a little bit is rewarding, because I do have a daughter, right? And these women that are now part of these spaces and taking over and taking it to unimaginable spaces, she gets to see that. She gets to be a part of that. And again, it's that foundation that they are setting and that trailblazing that they are doing is unbelievable. And hopefully it'll continue for generations to generations to generations to generations. And it had to start somewhere, and it started with them. And they are just doing amazing things with it. And I'm happy to be even, I don't want to say a mentor. I don't even know what to say, a little piece of it, right? A little piece of their journey, and continue, because I still talk to them to this day. I'm just happy. I'm ecstatic, and I can't wait to see where it continues to grow and go, right? And I look back and I'm pumped up. I'm pumped up and lost for words, really.
Yeah. Well, and you talked an interesting, this idea of like, just cracking the door open, right? And they had to run through the door and really bust it wide open. But it's an interesting conversation, right? Like you were mentioning a few minutes ago about like, what does allyship actually look like? Right? What does it mean to be a great teammate? So I'm curious, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people know is that, through, Coach Taylor, right, and Emily Todd, really working to the women's football conference, you've been there, right? Like you've been there in the audience, you're watching, you've been there as a speaker, as a facilitator. How important do you think that allyship is, having someone like you that is a leader, in the football space, in the men's tackle space, but then also sharing your lived experience, your wisdom as a high quality athlete coach, but then also speaking in and serving this next generation of leaders in the women and girls space? I'm kind of curious, like what sort of inspired that decision to be an ally in this space?
I think, like I would have said way back when, is somebody had to open the door for me to be able to sit here as a head coach at U Sports, right? Somebody had to give me that opportunity and do those things. And it's for me just to give back, right? And if I get into a position where I can sort of give back or give some help or some guidance, then that I feel to keep this great game going and to evolving, I think I said it the other day is, I've learned so many lessons from this game. I've been able to, play at a high level and coach at a high level. And it's my duty, I feel, to give back to this great game that's given me so much, right? And doing that piece. So for me, it wasn't a matter of if, it was just when and then how, right? How can I do it? How can I help? What can I do? But I knew I was going to do something. I just didn't know what it was or how.
Mhm.
And then it just happened that, people come into your lives at a moment, could be for a moment, could be for a lifetime at a particular time. And I guess at that particular time, it was just right for those young women to come into sort of connect with me. And then myself at that time, I was able enough, probably mature enough and understanding enough to maybe crack that door open. And listen, they do the work. I take no credit for what they do. They are outstanding people.
Mhm.
Football knowledge is unbelievable. And like Emily and Taylor that you talked about, and Coach Ruler down there, and they have just taken it. Like my little conversation with Coach Taylor or Coach Ruler, they had it going on. They just needed someone to open the door. And that was just for me to at least give a little bit of that because somebody did that for me. And it's like paying it forward and giving the chance. And then once you get the chance, you know what? They've run with it and there's no stopping them now. Right. So somebody opened the door for me and gave me an opportunity to get into this coaching business.
Mhm.
And now that I'm in there, I think it's my duty to also do that and pass it forward.
Mm. It's interesting as you share that, right? Like, as you said, you talked about duty, right? You really is that idea of like responsibility. So it sounds like, again, you being, the great leader you are, and, I'll give you your flowers because you are, someone who, inspires me, who I look at, I'm like, like if I can tap into, a smidgen of that, of Coach Grant's energy. Um, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Through some conversation with some emerging leaders, it seems like they are very aware. Hey, the conversation got going in 2020 around, what does diversity actually look like in practice? But it's been interesting because I think there's kind of this next evolution that has to happen.
Mhm.
I'm curious, what do you see as being the next evolution? Like, I think people understand that, our game has built in, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it can be so much better. What do you see as being the next logical evolution of this?
I think, and that's a great question. That's a deep one. Um, I think it's now it's that next generation, right? Because when I stepped forward and was doing different things back in 2021 and having these conversations, I was going through my lived experience, which was a lot different, right? And I was basing everything for me was, well, I went through this years ago when I was in university. I can't allow that to happen again without doing nothing, right? And things need to change. And I don't know what the change was or what it was going to be, but I was like, if students at that time were still going through what I went through at university, then we needed to make a change, right? So I think now, because my lived experience was that, these young students of today and these new leaders of today, their lived experience is going to be a lot different than what I went through. So that next evolution is sort of, I'll go back to it, like my son says, them learning from sort of our generation that took this next step right now to having that importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and having that not only within our sports but within our society and what that looks like. Now it's they're living their lived experiences and building off of that, right? And then taking sort of the lessons that we had, because I was taking the lessons of individuals that were from before me and then applying that to what I knew. Now with this whole social media piece, now I'm on one, like barely on social media, but what does that look like? And then how they can connect and their connectivity around not even their football community we always said was small. It's even smaller now, but they touch more of the world,
Mhm.
right? And having them, asking those questions, and then us who have been there, leading them, giving them sort of our knowledge, right? So what it looks like moving forward, I don't know,
Mm.
because of they're going to have to, the leaders of tomorrow and of today, it's going to be through their lived experiences. And hopefully we've done enough in this sports world where it's changed. So now it's going to look different. Like my daughter, when she gets to university, playing tackle football won't be anything new, or for her to play on an all women's team won't be something new or foreign to her, or to have a women's coach or a woman on her, it won't be something new to her. It'll just be like, that's just normal. How do I change this? Right. I know the big talk. I have a few women coming on to staff, right? What does football look like at the university sports? Why can't we get an all women's tackle? And I know different things, but at some point in time with OIFA, how that's evolved. It's just normal now. It's just what it is. It's just normal now. It's not, oh, this big, it's just normal, right? So it's building, things are going to look different from my time. So it's just giving them that space for them to things to develop, and then also giving them that support and that leadership and that guidance from what we did. And then I don't know what it's going to look like moving forward, which is great, right? Because if it looks the same, then we haven't evolved as much. It's going to look different, but also giving them that support, and then it's opening those other doors, right? And building off of that.
Mm. As you share that, it's like a reminder that, it's showing others what's possible. Hey, you can be in these roles. You can be in these opportunities. Hey, we can have a thriving men's tackle program and a women's tackle program in a U sport, right?
Yep.
Like, why not? But then, like you said, it's sort of that co-creation. Like, what do you want this thing to look like? Where do you want to go, right? And how can I help and support along there, right? What words of wisdom can I share based on my lived experience? So it really sounds like it's really asking those questions to the sort of the next generation of emerging leaders, and just
Yep.
what do you want this thing to look like?
Yeah, 100%, right? Because it's like they're going to have new ideas. They're going to have fresh ideas. They're going to have new ways of doing things, right? And if I say, well, I want it to look like this, well, if things are going to evolve, things change, right? And if it always stays, we're always evolving, and things are always changing, and probably changing for the better. Some things not, but some things are changing for the better. And then how do we use that? So it is asking those questions and then giving that guidance. And like you said, it's really, for me, it's creating that space, right? And the example I can use is for the women's program here at Carleton, right? My vision was I want to get more women into coaching, right? But that was me. And that was my vision. And okay, they're going to be part of my coaching staff and doing, this is what I want to see you do. And you're going to coach a position and doing that piece. And then sitting back and saying, one of the coaches said, well, when we do it this year, what are we looking for? And I said, you know what? I don't know. I'm going to hire the best people, the best individuals that come across my desk. I'm going to hire the best for right now for our program and where we're at. And then I'm going to ask them what they want to do. Right. And then put it there, because I had the idea, oh, I want you to be a coach. Well, you know what? There's so much you can do in this great game. It could be the admin spot. It could be football operations and doing that. And we were able to send Coach Leah, who came in last year, who's back with us. And she went and worked with the Toronto Argonauts in their football operations, and she loves it. And I told her, well, when you go there, bring back those ideas. And I have another coach coming on that wants to work in football ops, and let's collaborate and let's build this together. Right. So it is around creating that space and then saying, what do you want and how can I help? All right. And when we talk about servant leadership, how can I help you get to where you need to be? I'll use the resources within my power to help you. Tell me what you want, and then let's get it done, and we'll see if we can build this thing, something great together.
So I'm curious, as you reflect back on, how life has unfolded for you since shifting into this role at Carleton, do you think that has sort of shifted? It's like more about like raising other people up. Like I think back to, you just finished the experience in the CFL, right? Diversity sort of in that role, in their program. Was that sort of an inspiration to, one, challenge yourself to grow, but then also to show other coaches that are the U sport that, hey, if I can get to this program, then you can do it too? Is that
Yeah,
a bigger driver for you these days?
100%. It's giving those opportunities, right? And learning, and it still hasn't changed for me. And It's not a male dominant sport, it's a male prevalent sport, and we're changing it. And we can see in the NFL, we can see in the CFL, and we can see across youth sports. But yeah, it's always got to be evolving. The thinking and how we're doing things to give people sometimes an opportunity that they wouldn't get, right? And maybe if it is getting into football operations, uh, like I've widened my thinking about it and what that looks like, those things can help become an athletic director, right? Because of the operations and how big it is, and there's so many different roles here. Why just pigeonhole it and say, oh, it's just coaching? There is just so many. Our athletic therapists, we have 2 women on staff that are, great, right? And some of the best ATs that I've worked with and been around. So just giving, hey, what do you want? How can I help? And I'm here for that, right? And then I've been able to expand my thinking around that as I've developed the program, and it's really helped to help develop some individuals, and hopefully it'll continue to help develop them.
Mm. It's interesting that you share that, right? Like how it sounds like your perspective on what's possible is shifting too, right? You're like, oh, okay. And I think back to, like, you talked about operation side of things. I think back to, hey, your lived experience as a classroom teacher, how organizing, I mean, that's anyone that spent time in the classroom knows it's
Yeah.
like organizing, it's like herding cats, right? Anytime
Yep.
you've been in the classroom, and how those experiences prepared you to organize at the youth sport level, right? You organize the youth sport levels, preparing you if you want to go to CFL, right? You want to become an AD. It's just all preparing you for something potentially bigger, brighter, and it's
Yep.
just going to then create another opportunity for those a few, rungs lower on the ladder, as they call
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And like I'm still learning, right? I sit in this seat and everybody wants to become a head coach. And then you become a head coach and you're like, wait a second, I'm not coaching. Right. And we all look at things differently. And I'm sure the new head coaches coming in this year will think of things and do things a little differently. Me, I just do it the way I know how. But as you said, it's through my experiences as being a classroom teacher. And teaching kindergarten, I always use those lessons that I learned teaching kindergarten. I still use that today, right? Because you got to build it from the ground up. And I said that to some recruits the other day, right? Like, where do you learn to read? Kindergarten. Where do you know to write? Your name, your math, and doing all those things. That's kindergarten. Well, I'm a kindergarten specialist, but I still use those lessons of how to set up my kindergarten classroom, how to build that foundation,
Mhm.
how to get everybody on the same page, how to let things run on its own. So I do use those today for myself, and then making sure that I'm passing them around, because there are so many facets to this great game. There isn't just the one facet of, that coaching, but coaching is teaching, teaching is coaching, right? And those lessons that we're teaching our young athletes that come across, and even our coaching staff. So I use everything in the toolbox, from the coaches that have coached me to being in the classroom, those lessons I've learned, those teaching methods that I've learned, making sure I'm passing them down. If I'm the only teacher um, in the room, right? How am I coaching my coaches, right? Because we're always coaching them, not just only our players, but everybody around us. So I'm taking all those lessons I've learned along my journey and then putting them in, and then making sure, as people that come into this program, or not even in this program, that I get to touch or get to encounter, I'm trying to pass those lessons on too. And I'm also learning from them, right? I'm also learning and taking lessons from what they're saying too.
Mm. It's interesting because as you share that, it seems like, as as our awareness grows, right, as we
Yeah.
shift into new, different roles of leadership, and if we say from as we move up in these roles of leadership, all of a sudden we start to come to a point where we start to realize that actually I can affect more change, because if I'm a head coach, I can coach the coaches up, and then by coaching the coaches up, then they can sort of coach up the student athletes, right? So it sounds like that's been sort of a theme as you've grown and evolved on your journey.
Yeah, definitely. Right. And it also works the other way. I'm learning from my players,
Mhm.
right? I learn from my players. I learn from my coaches. I learn from others in the building and that I encounter too, right? My players have a lot of knowledge, and they have opinions, right? And obviously the buck stops at my door and doing those things, but I still listen to them, right? We have our leadership team on the football team, and I take what some of the things, and we sit down and we'll talk during the season, and having those conversations. What's important to them? What can I do to help? Right? What am I not seeing or hearing that you need that I'm not, being able to pass out to you guys? Right? So I have those conversations with them, but I also have them with other guys one on one, or it could just be being in the locker room and listening to them talk, right? And taking in those things, and they may not think I'm listening and doing that piece, which is fine, but I am, right? And trying to work, and things may not happen as immediately as they want because I have other things I have to do, but I take them in, I write them down, I put them in the back of my mind, and if I can get to them or if I can make it happen, I do my best to do that, right? And it's the same thing with the coaches, because if everybody's thinking like me and doing things my way, then I'm not growing. Right. And yes, anybody knows in that leadership position, you have to make those hard decisions in the end, but you want to make sure you're taking in different points of view, because if everybody's thinking like me, then I'm not growing as an individual. So it's multifaceted, but yes, I'm in that position where I do make it, but I do take in that other information from others. And sometimes they don't even know they're giving me that information, right? You said it earlier, counting blessings, right? I'm always taking quotes and sharing them with the players, and doing those things in our meetings, and taking different words and keywords, and what's our, how do I say it? What is our motto? What are we going into the season talking about? Right? It could be just as simple as you saying that to me, is that, what, that's what we're going to ride with this coming fall, right? Counting our blessings. Maybe it is, maybe, some of the things we do, we never know what's going to take, but I'm always taking in information and seeing, learning for myself. And that's just that process, right? That process of evolving and changing my mindset changing, and doing these things as I build not only this program, but build myself.
Mm. It's interesting as you share, a couple of things sort of popped out there. It's reminding that, that power to create change,
Yep.
whether we're talking as coaches, whether we're talking personal life, whether it's, anything, our finances, really change always, true and meaningful change always starts within, right?
Yep.
You got to change your perspective. And I love the reminder and of this idea. It's so easy in life to fall into these echo chambers where we're just surrounded by people that think like us, that dress like us, that talk like us, that come from the same experience, and really challenging ourselves to be around people that challenge you in a different way. They're willing to offer you feedback, and often isn't very warm and fuzzy. It actually is a catalyst to like ignite yourself, like your soul on fire, and helps you to actually help and serve more people. So it's really resonates with me, because I know over the last few years that's something I've been challenging myself to embrace, that diversity of thought, feedback people, even if it's stuff I don't agree with, take it in, just listen.
Yeah. And it's right. And because as we talk about change, right, and having more different voices in the room, all of a sudden you get in the room, now you want it to be the same as no, that we talked about. Like, this is why we were having those conversations. This is why we're still having these conversations. We want to have those different perspectives, those different voices in the room, and how we do things, right? Because even with the women on staff that are on my coaching staff, and how they do things, and I'll never forget Coach Taylor coming in that very first time, and I think when we had those conversations at the end of the program and talking, and the feedback that she gave was like, okay, that makes sense. So moving forward, I've evolved, right? It's evolved, but having that feedback, but that different way of how we did things, how we were teaching things, even as football coaches, and myself as offensive coordinator, how I was teaching things, to have somebody else come in with a different perspective and a different way of doing things was like making me say, okay, why are we always doing it this way? That's the way we've been doing it. But why can't we do it this way? Right? But I had a different voice in the room, and even being a head coach and sitting and having these conversations with my coaching and my coaching staff, and trying to keep it very diverse. One, it's important for me to have a diverse staff, because I want my players to see leadership can look differently. There can be different coaches, there can be different people, CEOs, and different coaching styles and doing those things. That's important for these young men to see that, to have a positional coach that is a woman, right, or a female that's at that position. So they're taking in that information. That person's leading you. Why is that important? Because someday your boss may be a woman, and it won't be a big surprise to you. Oh, yes, no, I can take and having those different leaders and those different voices and different backgrounds, that's important for me in my locker room. So for me as a head coach, I want that also. So yeah, those echo chambers can cause a lot of problems and get you into a lot of problems. So you want to make sure, and I try my best to do that, and then making sure those around me know, right? But in the end, I do have the pen last.
Yeah.
but that falls on my shoulders, but I do take it in. Is sometimes they would say, and my coaches will say the same thing, and no different. My kids, you're not listening. I am. I'm taking it in, but at some point in time, I do have to make that final decision.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you share that. And what's funny is you you talked about that conversation with Coach Taylor on our first conversation. So that experience for you was really impactful. I mean, you're still sharing that 3 years later.
Yeah.
But I think you also sort of tie in the other side of that. Hey, we can be open to diversity of thought, but that important, like, we can agree to disagree, and that's okay, right? And
yeah,
that's something that you highlight there. Like, yeah, I hear you. I may not agree with you, but I'll listen. But does it mean that we're going to totally agree, and that's okay.
And that's okay, and that's important to me too, right? Have those discussions, have those meaningful discussions. Then when I say we're done, like, we're good. Let's move on and move forward. Now, if we can't, then that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we do a good job of getting that done. Now, this is me sitting here speaking. My coaches might say something else different, right? That's just me talking to you, and I'm open. I have all, when it comes down to it in the end, everything does sit with me at the end of the day. So I do take that into consideration, and hopefully they know that. But I do take in a lot of what they do say. I may not take it in right there at the moment, but it does sit in the back of my mind.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's great. I'm curious, brother. I want to be respectful of your time and energy here. I'm curious. You work with a lot of emerging leaders, either from a coaching perspective, student leader perspective. I'm curious, knowing what you know now, if they were about to embark on a new leadership journey, maybe it was a leadership journey in professional sense, maybe they're shifting into a team captain role. What words, if they were going to ask you, coach, what words of wisdom, can you share with me? What's that piece of advice that you would give to someone stepping into a new leadership role in terms of how they can more effectively lead and truly help and support and serve those around them? Yeah, kind of curious.
I think one of them, be open to ideas, right? Not everything, there's many different ways to do something. So be open to those ideas, right? Always be ready to pivot, right? There's no straight line. So always be ready to pivot. And the one thing I would always say, and for myself, is you belong. You're there for a reason. You belong, right? So then everybody says, sometimes keep your head down and work. My mom said, don't keep your head down, keep your head up, right? You belong, keep your head up, keep your chest high, you belong, and then go out and do it, right? And that would be my biggest thing, because sometimes we get into those leadership positions. Everybody gets nervous, and you belong, and never be afraid to make a mistake. And if you make a mistake, own up to it, correct it, and then move forward, because you belong in that space. You're there for a reason, and go do that, and hold your head up high.
Such simple words, but important words that we all need those reminders from time to time, right?
Yep.
I'm curious, brother. Again, I know you are someone that values helping and supporting and serving others. I'm curious, is there anything people can keep their eye out in terms of, what's in store for, Carleton Ravens football? Is there anywhere where, we can sort of support what you're helping to grow?
Yeah, no, I think I will say, obviously, come out and watch Carleton Ravens football, stream us, and do that piece. But I think it's youth sport football in general, right? It's football in general, right? And it doesn't matter to me whether it's Carleton, whether it's, Cumberland, Myers, the Hamilton Junior Ticats, Team Ontario. It's our Canadian team playing right now and doing those things. This great game has given me so many lessons. And we need to keep this game going at the amateur level, the pro level in Canada. It's evolving. For me, the conversation I love to hear when I listen to the CFL is hearing about these great Canadian receivers. We've been here. We've been doing it, right? My biggest thing is for everybody just to go out and support your local football team, support Team Ontario, support Team Canada. Get out there, get your kids involved, get them involved in the tackle, get them involved in the flag, get them involved with this great game. There's so many lessons to learn with this great game about teamwork, accountability, discipline. Go out and support football at all levels. Parents, get out there and support. Get out there and coach. Let's be respectful to our referees, to our young referees, to all of our referees. They're doing this because they allow this great game to be played at all levels. Make sure we're respecting our referees and doing this great thing. That's my big thing. It's not even so much about Carleton football. This great game and this conversation is bigger than that. It's about football in general, bringing up great leaders of tomorrow that play this great game at all levels. And that's what I got to say to this. And I want to say to you, thank you for the work that you do in this space and continue to do. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate our conversations like this, but even when we meet in person, and we take 5 minutes and you're busy and I'm busy, but we take those 30 seconds even to say hello, have that quick conversation and move on. Nothing but love coming from me for the work that you do, Football Ontario does, and football across Canada. So I want to give you your flowers and say thank you and keep up the great work, and let's go.
Thank you, brother. It's interesting what you shared. Recently recorded another conversation and a revisited one, and someone who I know well kind of talked about the same idea, like, let's celebrate our beautiful game, like, as a whole. So it's interesting, two conversations, two leaders that I very much admire and respect are all talking, no, this is bigger. This is all of our games. So I just want to thank you for reminding us about sort of the bigger picture here.
Thank you. No problem.
Coach Grant, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for the great man you are, the great husband, the great dad, the great teacher, the coach, mentor, but more importantly, the amazing human being you are. The one thing I always appreciate about you, whether it's, catching you for 30 seconds at an event, whether it's being at Carleton for an ID camp, the one thing I always appreciate about you is just your energy, like the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion you bring to life. That I hear you in my head go, okay, it's time to go, right? I just want to thank you again for always, because you're someone who I look to as like, am I bringing that kind of energy, enthusiasm? So I just want to thank you for sharing that with the world, but more importantly, like, reminding me, like, that's what it means to be, an effective leader, is bringing the energy, bringing the enthusiasm, bringing the passion for life. So thank you, brother.
No, thank you. And listen, energy, we got to bring it. We got to always be bringing that energy. It's, what it's not created. It's just transfer from one object to the next, right? Absolutely. We want to make sure any room we go into, any space we go into, we want to make sure we're bringing that energy, because you never know in that moment who you're affecting, who's having that downtime, who's not really feeling it. And then your presence could be the difference, and you never know, right? So bring that energy into the rooms that we have, to the spaces that we have, and hopefully we can transfer that positive energy, because you never know who you're affecting in that moment.
Absolutely, brother. So folks, Coach Grant dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. But as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's a consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually helps you to create greater results in your life. So my challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. And my only ask from these conversations, if it resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please share it with a friend, a loved one, a teammate, just someone you think that would benefit from listening to positive, inspiring, and empowering ideas. The more people we have listening, understanding, and applying these simple principles to their life, the more blessed this world will be. As always, love having these conversations with you in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day, everyone.